This week, the spotlight is on Kiswahili, a language that has grown far beyond the borders of East Africa to become one of the fastest growing languages in the world. Spoken by more than 100 million people across Africa and beyond, Kiswahili has become a symbol of African identity, unity, culture, and opportunity. Its global recognition continues to gather momentum as UNESCO designated July 7th as the World Kiswahili Language Day, making Kiswahili the first African language to receive such an honor. Earlier on last month in July, UNESCO headquarters in Paris hosted the second International Kiswahili Conference, which brought together scholars, policymakers, and language experts from around the world. Looking back, what were the key outcomes of the conference and how will they shape the future of global Kiswahili expansion? Today on this episode, we explore how Kiswahili is shaping Africa's future and why its influence continues to expand across the world. And to unpack Kiswahili, Africa's language, and Africa's future, here at the studio, we are joined with two distinguished guests, one from Uganda and one from Tanzania. The first one is Dr. Kisembo Ron Extendo, who is the Group CEO of Africa Mashariki First, but also the Secretary General of African Union Kiswahili Commission. Welcome to Focus on This Week.
Thank you, Carol, for having me, and it's always a pleasure when I'm in Tanzania to have a minute to come to TBC.
The third time we're having you on the program. But we're also having Professor Aldin Kai Mutembe from the University of Dar es Salaam. He is also the coordinator of the African Union Kiswahili Commission. Welcome to Focus on This Week.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Let me start with you, Professor Mutembe. We clearly understand that UNESCO declared 7th of July every year to be the World Kiswahili Language Day. Kindly tell us, this decision actually made Kiswahili to be the first language to receive such a global recognition. Now, what does this achievement mean to Africa's languages and African identity in general?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. First and foremost, the language, the decision elevates the status of African languages. So from that kind of a decision, now we see African languages as equal platform, equal footing with other international languages. So Swahili being elevated to have its own international day, it means a lot to not only to Tanzanians or to East Africans, but also to all Africans in general, saying that we have now a language that can be equal in science, in technology, in social and economic aspects as other languages have. So yeah, it is something that we have to look back and say, well, this is something we should be happy and we should cherish.
Indeed. Do you think this was the vision that maybe founding father of the nation, Tanzania, and the founding fathers of Africa had envisioned, to see Kiswahili one day being a language that will be globally recognized?
I think that was indeed their vision. Thinking on Pan-African framework, there was a time when Kwame Nkrumah had agreed with Mwalimu Nyerere that Swahili one day will be the language of Africa. And that's why actually Kwame Nkrumah chose Swahili as to be the first language to be taught in Ghana. And for your information, Ghana became the first country in Africa to teach Swahili at the university level in 1964, well ahead before even Tanzania. Of course, they had this vision that one day we have to have, in order to realize the Pan-Africanism movement, we have to have one language that unites us all. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor. Let me go to Dr. Tendo. Dr. Tendo, what do you think about this decision? Which status has it positioned Kiswahili? As Professor has explained, it has indeed elevated Kiswahili. But what about your perspective?
Thank you so much. For starters, whereas we appreciate UNESCO for that decision, but for far too long, we have embraced foreign languages and celebrated them. So as a
before you continue
Yes.
here in Tanzania. For instance, if you hear someone speaking English, it was like, oh my, you're educated, you're up there. But now Kiswahili is there.
So where I sit, I strongly believe that the decision by UNESCO is a welcome idea, but African leaders, we the Africans, needed to have done much more going forward, because when our leaders go to the US for the UN General Assembly, we have seen them over these years speak English, French, and these other languages that are internationally recognized. Where does that leave Africa as a continent? 55 states failing to come up with a single language of identity. Whatever narrative we may want to come up with, without a common language of identity, we cannot talk about the independence of partner states and the continent. So it's right about time that right now we can proudly say that Swahili language has gotten global recognition. But at the same time, the leadership of the African Union also saw it fit that we cannot continue to speak English, continue with the French, Portuguese, Arabic, and all that, minus an African language. So as we talk now, Swahili has the official working language status at the AU Secretariat in Addis Ababa. So to me, it's a welcome idea, but it's upon us, Africans, to know that this is our own language. We need to push for it so that at the global stage, it's about what you present. If you don't have anything to present, then you shall adopt what is already presented to you.
And
Yes.
Dr. Tendo, this is such a big achievement now that we're having Kiswahili at the African Union. Kiswahili is recognized globally. But I was just curious, why had the process now delayed for over the years, you know, from the liberation era up to date? Now is the time that we're recognizing Kiswahili. What was happening all along the way?
I think, by and large, the disunity within Africa. You know, in my view, we don't need UNESCO or United Nations to approve this language. This is an African language of identity. Much as the narrative out there is that anything European, anything from the West, we value it, as you said. But we don't need, honestly speaking, it shouldn't be UNESCO dictating that this is an international language for Swahili. Why? This is an African language. 55 countries. Our leadership on the continent have by now agreed that we cannot push for any agenda without a common language.
But if I can chip in there,
Yes, Professor.
Historically, when the current AU was being formed as Organization of African Unity, OAU, way back in 1963, they had decided that it will come a day when an African language will be used. 1963 will be used in the meetings and official sitting of the OAU then. It didn't happen until 2004, when the former president of Mozambique, for the first time, announced and ceremoniously, you know, suddenly saying, I want to speak
Portuguese.
You know, I want to speak, give my speech in Swahili.
In Swahili.
And yes, in Swahili. And he started using Swahili right there. And people are saying, no, wait, I say, go back to the charter.
Yeah, sure.
We said in 1963. So it's high time. So it was from 2004 when the then chairman Chissano, the president of Mozambique, decided that we have to work a talk. So he gave a speech in Kiswahili, of course, with the support of other Swahili-speaking countries. Then they started working on how now to realize our dream, the forefathers' dream, that we ought to have an African language that will be officially in AU meetings. So the decision now that, you know, it has been accepted officially as a working language, a language of wider communication, tells you the history of promoting the language across the board. Yeah.
Indeed.
And
Yes,
maybe additionally, the willingness, we have seen the will from some of the leaders on the continent. You know, it's a big challenge to us, we'll get to that later, that whereas we want to promote the adoption and the domestication of this language on the continent, we have a challenge at strategic level. You know, when you look at our national assemblies across board in Africa, even here in East Africa, the origin of Swahili language, most of the partner states are still holding on to the colonial master's language in our national parliaments. Now, this also limits effective representation. When you look at our members of parliament from Uganda, from Kenya, from South Sudan, these are partner states of East Africa, it becomes increasingly hard for them to effectively deliver the challenges of the constituencies they represent in parliament, because you are conditioning them to get on the floor of parliament and make their presentations in English. If you looked at the model parliament of Tanzania, where a member of parliament representing Arusha, representing Dar es Salaam as a constituency, gets on the floor of parliament, has an opportunity to air out the challenges of the constituency he or she represents in Swahili. So there you are not limiting someone from expressing the concerns effectively. And I want on this note to thank Her Excellency, Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan. I always attend the African Union Heads of State Summit in Addis Ababa, but equally the EAC Heads of State Summit in Arusha. It's now evident in the past 1 or 2 years, when she gets an opportunity now to give her speech, she's now intentional. Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan has been intentional now, giving her speech in Swahili. I've seen that this year, early this year in Addis Ababa, equally this year when we were in Arusha for the EAC Heads of State Summit. We need people like her at strategic level to champion this. Why do we have leaders go to the UN General Assembly, they have to prepare and even rehearse their speeches because they are going to speak English at a UN platform? Whereas we would also go to UN General Assembly, get on the podium, give your speech in Swahili. Let them also use the gadgets for translation as opposed to what we have. Yes.
Let me go to Professor Mutembe. You clearly explained that political will is really important to make sure that Kiswahili language grows and goes on. Professor, before we began this interview, you were telling me the word chai, tea, came from a Chinese word. Can you kindly tell us now that we most of the time hear you saying that Kiswahili is a language that has rich knowledge, history, and heritage. Can you kindly tell us how now do we ensure that this language that is growing continues to grow, and how do we allow now a room for the Kiswahili language to grow and not only to remain as our own language, but also, you know, remain as an African language, as a global language?
Yes, actually, Swahili is not unique. And speaking as a commissioner now of Swahili, responsible for the spreading of Swahili in Africa, I see Swahili becoming an African language, not confined to the traditional dialects only, but Swahili being unique because it absorbs, it adopts words from other languages, African languages, but also other international languages from outside Africa, like Persia, Portuguese, French, English, Germany, Chinese, and so on. I see now the future of Swahili embracing other vocabularies from other African languages. I see Swahili becoming an African language with some vocabulary from Zulu, for instance, from Shona, from Osivambo in Namibia, in West Africa, from Hausa, which is closer to the Arabic, from Fulfude, Wolof in Senegal, etc. So I see Africa, while retaining its standard form, but also embracing, as it were, some of the words and vocabulary and values, because when we talk of a language, we also talk of culture. We adopt Arabic culture because of the Arabic language. We have some Arabic culture, but also we now adopt English culture. You wear a suit, you wear tradition. That's English. But I see a culture, a vision of the Swahili culture embracing the African identity more and rather than outside. Until such a time, this will be a language which is unique in Africa, as it is in East Africa, a unique language that is not confined to a specific ethnic group, but it has, in Tanzania, for instance, it has this Tanzanian identity. In East Africa, you have this East African identity. You have words from ethnic groups in Uganda. You have words from ethnic groups in Kenya. So the vision I see now, the ideal situation for the African, for Swahili in the future is to have the language being an African language, embracing the identity of Africa, meaning languages from African continent, but also, why not, from the diaspora. We have some words now from Swahili into English. You have safari, you have Simba, and so on. Now these are English words, adopted from Swahili. So I don't see why Swahili should not be like elsewhere, getting into vocabulary and but retaining actually the standard and the structure and the syntax of the Swahili, of the original Swahili, basing on the Unguja dialect. Yes.
And Professor, with the works that you're doing now, in teaching Kiswahili, and we understand that Kiswahili now is taught all around the world,
yes,
in so many countries. You mentioned earlier on Germany. Before we began the
yes,
interview, we are now seeing a lot of people from Russia speaking Swahili.
Yes.
Can you kindly tell us what does this mean for Kiswahili to be a language that is spoken, by most people all around the globe? But also, as you're explaining that, have you encountered maybe investors, maybe a different international community being interested with the language?
Oh yes, oh yes. I'll give you an example using Nyerere's vision. When he went to South Africa, he said, when I go out there, people ask me about it, Tanzania, and they ask me about the war in Congo and so on. And I said, I'm wondering, because Congo is far away from here, or these other countries, they're far from Africa, from Tanzania, but when they see me, they see Africa. And that thing is very important. That's kind of thinking is very important. When you're outside, or most of foreigners think Africa is one country. Yeah. They think, therefore, that this country called Africa has one language, which is Swahili. And so they say, I want to learn Swahili because I'm going to Angola. I want to learn Swahili because I'm going to Niger. See, they take Africa as one country, and because they know Swahili, they think this is the language for Africa. For the whole and I think they are right, because and that's what we are fighting for. Swahili should be the language for Africa. So a lot of investors actually are interested in studying and learning Swahili. I was in China. The Chinese companies who are investing in East Africa, they want to learn Swahili. They are learning Swahili. I had a group of students now learning Swahili. You go to Russia. Russia started teaching Swahili in the 50s. And actually, when we talk of foreigners speaking Swahili, we should not forget that actually we have a lot of radio and TV that started broadcasting Swahili in the 50s, because we had this vision of becoming Wajamaa, Jamaa and socialism, African socialism. So they were thinking Africa as one continent having Swahili. So you have radio China, you have French International, you have these all broadcasting in Swahili in the 50s. So today, several investors from Russia, from China, from Asia and Japan, South Korea, coming to Tanzania, to Kenya, to Uganda, investing but also learning Swahili. So I can see Swahili becoming not only for a language for communication, but also a language to ease trade, as it used to be, a language of trade, commerce, region. Now it's expanding. But even before we go outside, I would like to go back to Africa and have Swahili as a language of trade in Africa, so that you can trade in one another in Africa. Yes.
Professor, let me take that question to Dr. Tendo. Let's talk about the role of Kiswahili in the Africa Free Trade Continental Area. Have we already begun using Swahili? What is its status so far? And what should we expect to benefit now when we will actually implement Kiswahili in the trade within the continent?
Thank you, Carol. For starters, I wanted to just add something little on what Professor submitted. You know, Swahili language is a progressive language. And by that, it should allow room for growth.
For growth, yes.
Adoption of vocabulary from other dialects, not only in Africa, but even beyond. That is number one. And we should also be mindful of the challenge of protectionism. You know, there is that saying, Kiswahili chetu. That is dangerous. I always share with colleagues in different forums that Mwalimu Nyerere ni baba wa taifa, Tanzania. But Mwalimu Nyerere is for us all, as Africa. No one owns Mwalimu Nyerere. He's our own. The same way, I'm saying this deliberately because lest we forget that if we don't open up, once we remain closed with protectionism, that one will hinder the progress, the momentum of adoption of Swahili language. Now, going back to your question, like I said earlier, we cannot claim absolute independence. Whether Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, all these partner states of East Africa, and Africa at large, you don't talk of absolute independence when you are still speaking a language of a foreign master. For starters, as Pan-Africanists, that's a challenge. I was last year on TV in Uganda. We were celebrating our independence anniversary. And I was asking the panel of eminent leaders in our country. And I was asking them, look, we are here on a national television celebrating independence anniversary, but busy speaking English. Why can't we embrace Swahili? Because now, the beauty with the Swahili, it overrides and it embraces us, it unifies us. Because if we came in here, Professor starts speaking his language from Bukoba, you also begin to speak your language maybe from Uchagani. You know, now that will be chaotic. So, Swahili now unifies us. Now, when we come to Africa Continental Free Trade Area, Swahili is a trade enabler. Whereas we are looking at it from a strategic level, this Swahili is not only a language that should be used in boardrooms when leaders convene for meetings. Actually, the real essence of adopting Swahili is facilitating day-to-day transactions among the wananchi. When you live, I am from Uganda. If I live here now and I go to Kariako this afternoon, and I want to probably purchase a mobile phone, my mere arriving at Kariako and I tell the shop owner, "Hi, good afternoon, I want that phone," that already has an impact on the cost price of the mobile phone.
Of course.
Anamuzia mgeni, that has an impact. But ninapofika Kariako nikamwambia hii simu nauzaje? Tafadhali nipunguzie. Ataona ni mbongo mwenzake. That's not the difference. When we talk about cross-border trade, every day Ugandans are crossing from Kampala to Nairobi to Dar es Salaam. They are coming to do business. Once they get in here and they are not conversant with the local language, which is now the Swahili language that we are advocating for, whatever transactions they are going to engage themselves in will be at a certain cost. And that cost is also implied in the cost price of the goods and services they have come to procure. So in my view, when we talk of cross-border trade, two things are critical. Infrastructure, connectivity. I'm happy the government of Tanzania here the standard gauge railway, they are also trying. Kenya has also gone ahead with SGR, Uganda. Now, regional connectivity and then ultimately continental connectivity is important. But after connecting our region to allow people move freely, then as you move, you must communicate.
Yes.
Are we going to communicate? Are we going to sit in a train speaking French, Arabic? That confusion needs to come to an end.
Indeed.
And we can only be proud as Africans when we have our own language, which is Swahili.
But let me chip in there.
Yes,
You mentioned the word being proud. I'll give just an anecdote. The other day we were talking with Shafi, Adam Shafi,
the author.
The famous writer, a novelist. He told us a story. He was in Germany. And then suddenly he saw two people, Europeans, speaking Swahili.
Very good.
And he approached them. He greeted them in Swahili. He said, hey, so you are Swahili? Yes, I'm Swahili. But you are all European, Wazungu. Why are you speaking Swahili? They said, no. The one was coming from Russia. I said, I come from Russia. I don't speak his language. He's from Poland. He speaks Polish. He doesn't speak my language. So we found that we were all in Tanzania. So we started using Swahili. That is a common language. So you can see now that even Europeans, somewhere there, the convenient language for them is Kiswahili because they were there. And that also gives us another story back in the 60s when there was a meeting from the DRC, Malawi, and East Africa here. They wanted to converse in a certain point. And one said, well, we cannot because we are French. The other, no, because we are English. Anglophone, Francophone. So there was no meeting going on. Until one member who was from Malawi, I remember, I think, Kanyama Chiume, who said, well, I come from Anglophone, so I speak English, and this one comes from DRC, but he speaks Swahili. So he will be telling me in Swahili, I translate in English, and the English tells me in English, I tell him in Swahili, and then he converts into Francophone, into French. So that kind of Swahili, English, French, but Swahili was a connector. That makes us, or makes me proud, emotion of proud, saying Swahili is more than a language for communication, but it connects not only in trade, but also facilitates other transaction, not only in trade or in other business, but also in facilitating the meetings. And I would love also in education. We can also jump there, say the language of instruction should be Swahili, because then it will be facilitating the knowledge, making the knowledge even easier for our students. So I wanted to use those two examples where Swahili stood as a connector or a facilitator in a situation where it was impossible to communicate. Yes.
And,
briefly, on my way to Paris for the International Swahili Conference.
That was what we're about to talk about.
Okay. I traveled with Qatar Airways, and when I landed in Doha, amazingly, I found a group of, first of all, I was intrigued. As I was heading to the lounge, I found a group of around 9 young men and women working at the airport as security guards. What intrigued me was to hear Swahili. First of all, I paused, only to realize these were Kenyans and Tanzanians working at the airport in Doha. Now, if there wasn't this connector of Swahili, they were blending properly. Kenya, Tanzania. Swahili was the uniting factor. Then something very critical to the viewer out there. In the 60s, when Mwalimu Nyerere was supporting the frontline states in terms of fighting for their liberation, I learned this from Mama Maria Nyerere when she told me that Mwalimu had an arrangement with Fidel Castro. When Swahili teachers would be flown from Dar es Salaam to Havana and Santiago de Cuba to go and teach Cuban doctors and fighters before they could come. You imagine if you have pain here and a Cuban doctor is right next to you, but you cannot explain the pain. So these people would undergo Swahili classes, and once they learned a bit of Swahili, then they would be flown to come and treat those who are injured on the front line. So what does that mean? Our leaders were strategic. Our leaders were very strategic. And they knew that our local Kichaga, Kipare, this will confuse us. Let's embrace one language. And we give credit to Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere for that visionary leadership.
Indeed, it's a vision that is happening now.
Sure.
Yes.
Let me go to Professor Mutembe now on the same note that he spoke earlier about the conference that took place in Paris.
Yes.
You know, it's a Swahili commemoration of Swahili language, but it took place in Paris.
Yes.
Far away from Africa.
Yeah.
What does this mean?
Yes, there's a lot of meaning. Because we have to see Swahili as a strategic language, and the implementation of the spread and development of Swahili should also be strategic. So we have two approaches here to strengthen the spread of Swahili outside Africa, so that they also bring awareness to the potential investors, for potential tourists, and for potential partnership. So that is a strategy of taking Swahili out there. That does not mean that we also see the development of Swahili in Africa. Whereas we want to develop and have a Swahili outside there, we should also emphasize Swahili within Africa. So the meeting in Paris and the first meeting in Cuba had that kind of strategy to establish links for the potential partners, investors, tourists, and so on. So we went to Paris. And Paris should be looked in this way. We went there during summer. And in Paris, there's a lot of tourists in Paris coming to see a lot of tourist attractions there. So it was a strategy. We are going to Paris not to meet with the French people alone, but mainly to meet all nations that they meet in Paris during summer holidays. And indeed we did, with the Minister Makonda, with the other leaders, saying, let us go out there. You saw us dancing on the streets and so on, because we were attracting saying, who are these Africans dancing on the street? And then said, we are coming from Tanzania, we have this Swahili. We are coming from Kenya, we have this Swahili, and give them the flag and saying in Swahili, Asante, how are you, Jambo, and so on. In that way, actually, you promote Swahili in a way that would not have been same level as you are promoting Swahili in the classroom. So when you're out there in Paris or in London or in Moscow or wherever outside, that's a very good strategy, because then slowly you draw attention to people saying, who are these? What is the kind of Swahili and so on? Where is Dar es Salaam? Where is Tanzania, etc. So people became aware not only of the Swahili of the International Day, Swahili International Day, but also aware that this language is existing. One, the countries, this language is African language that is developing and so on. So, as I said, strategically, and I really support the movement that we should make Swahili bring tourists, bring investors and so on outside. But I also insist that we give credit to the outsiders in equal footing or even more on African continent. The same we did in Paris. I would love to see the same happening in Abuja, in Nigeria, the same happening in Freetown, Liberia, in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Addis Ababa, so that African people will also understand this is our language. It's not a Tanzanian or East African language, it is African language, first and foremost. So to me, the Paris meeting was very strategic.
Indeed,
Yeah.
the Paris conference was indeed strategic.
Yep.
But there, what is the power, or what role do diasporas who are outside of the continent play now in spreading Kiswahili?
Thank you. I want to start by reminding viewers out there that before we went to Havana in 2024, Her Excellency Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan had initiated a slogan, tubidhaishe Kiswahili.
Yeah.
Tunapofanya Kiswahili kuwa bidhaa, we are creating opportunities for Swahili stakeholders. By this I mean, to answer you, I'm just going to combine both. When, for example, we go to Paris, those involved, now us involved in this, need to be a little bit more dynamic when we are packaging the whole conference aspect. Because once we are in Paris, we not only take Swahili as a language, it's just a component of the wider package. One, I'm looking at our culture. Naona kuna siku ya Mswahili,
yes.
People get to know how do we dress, Waswahili wanavaje, how do they prepare food. Now, away from that, let's look at the opportunities associated with the literature, the written literature. What wameandika vitabu. These books may not have gotten market currently on the African continent or within Tanzania, Zanzibar, and Kenya and beyond. But now when we have such a wider reach, if we go to such international cities, we carry the language, but we also carry teaching and learning materials,
Yes.
which will be sold, okay, in those streets. People in Paris, as it was Professor put it, summertime, tourists from all over Europe and the States and Africa. Now they are like, oh, this is Swahili. Okay, how can I learn a few words? So the Joram Nkumbis of this world were on the streets, okay, promoting the language. But it's also important that written literature is also carried along. And I would also think going forward, we need to organize kuna tamasha la mapishi ya Kiswahili on the streets, not in the hotels where we are residing. In Cuba, when we went there in 2024, we had the challenge of a cyclone that really disturbed us and all that. So usiku wa Mswahili ukafanyika ndani ya hotel. But I look forward to a day when, for example, we are in Moscow, on the streets of Moscow, saying that the climax of the International Swahili Conference is a display, an exhibition of the Swahili culture. We all dress the Swahili way. We cook. We take them through. Shortly, the Swahili menu, the cuisine, the Swahili cuisine would find its way in the international hotels. So, tunapozungumzia kubidhaisha Kiswahili, kama mama alivyosema, it's wide and the opportunities to tap the low-hanging fruits associated with Swahili. I mean, the only challenge as a Pan-Africanist that I don't buy, we need to pay close attention to promoting Swahili within Africa first, before we yearn to take it to those international capitals. Reason, it will be shameful of us to now go to New York and go and celebrate Swahili on the streets of New York, when in Bamako, people we don't have maybe a quarter of the population speaking Swahili. That would be shooting randomly, and we may run out of bullets.
And Doctor, what is are the Africans themselves willing to learn this Swahili?
I began by talking about leadership. You see, at policy level, once our leaders agree in good faith, once the willingness, I talked of the will, if a leader is willing, for example in Uganda, President Museveni has been crusading for the adoption of Swahili. All members of parliament and our cabinet have to, now our cabinet, Baraza la Mawaziri, every Monday, before they begin their day's business, kuna darasa la Kiswahili. Mawaziri wote, they study Swahili. We are now saying, at policy level, if countries, ministries of education and culture, once they say, we are taking on this language from grassroots, let Swahili be taught at primary level, secondary, university. That is one angle. Then number two, let's have adult classes in common markets, common areas like now Kariako. You imagine if you had a huge class of Swahili in the Kariako of Lagos. Watatoka huko wakishajua the beauty. First of all, you are associating with the language that is associated with your identity as an African. If we said we are beginning to teach French here at Makumbusho, people will come running because they want to come and learn French because of the superiority mentality that we attach to it. So to me, the taking of Swahili to New York, to Paris, to Moscow is a welcome idea, but more emphasis, much emphasis should be put on these celebrations being done within Africa. And that is part of the mandate for the African Union Swahili Commission.
But I want to add something very important, because people are out there, the leaders may be afraid that we are taking Swahili to their communities while they are having a lot of other languages. I went to South Africa, and that was their concern. Why are you bringing Swahili here? We have 11 languages, actually. Now they have 12 languages, including sign language. And that is the attitude of other people out there. But the University of Dar es Salaam, in collaboration with the University of KwaZulu-Natal, started a project that was the patron was the late now former President Ali Hassan Mwinyi. The project was to start teaching Swahili using indigenous language, African languages. So we launched this project in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. So what is the meaning of this project? If I were to go to Nigeria with all these other languages, okay, I should not teach Swahili using English simply because both Tanzania and Nigeria were colonized by the Britons. No, I will teach the Nigerians Swahili using either Yoruba or Igbo or Hausa, those indigenous languages, so that they are not afraid of the language, but they see Swahili language as theirs because they are using Yoruba to learn Swahili. If I were to go to Mali, I will use Fulfulde or these kind of languages. If I go to Senegal, I will use Wolof or Bambara, so that the people will appreciate that Swahili is coming into our community to also revive our own languages, but at the same time, we have one common languages, as it did in Tanzania. Okay, Swahili did not kill languages of Tanzania. So people were studying Swahili, either using their ethnic group, ethnic languages, or later on Swahili at large. Remember, during the adult education campaign, Elimu ya Watu Wazima, people were learning Swahili, our bibi and our fathers, learning Swahili using their mother tongue languages. In so doing, you also retain, if I were to ask you and you have children, they don't speak here, they don't speak Chaga, they don't speak Sukuma, they speak Swahili today. So they are losing not only the language, they are using your culture, your philosophy, your values. So when we go out there in Angola, Zambia, Mozambique, we would like actually to teach Swahili using the indigenous languages there. In other words, in that way, you retain the values, their values. They also value Swahili because you have also valuing their language. You retain their culture, you retain their philosophy and so on. In that way, you have common language, Swahili, but at the same time, elevating other African languages. And that is
Professor, has the initiative begun? Or?
Oh, yes, we did. We started, as I said, 5 or 6 years ago with President Mwinyi. We launched this project in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, and it started. We are now in Zimbabwe, a pilot study is doing. We are teaching Swahili using Shona in Zimbabwe. We are trying in a way using Zulu to teach Swahili there. And in Namibia last month, I was in Cape with the Namibians saying we are coming to Namibia because of the support of the Excellency President of Namibia. We wanted to use Shivambo in Namibia to teach Swahili. I don't speak Shivambo, but there are teachers there who will be able to come and learn Swahili using the pedagogy that they know. And all of us now, we have a common goal: teach Swahili using Shivambo. I'll be, so that kind of thing. You are not making Swahili a threat, but Swahili will be a facilitating language to also elevate their languages. So that's I'm answering your question. The president should not be afraid, actually, should embrace, as Kwame Nkrumah did.
Yeah.
Kwame Nkrumah did not speak Swahili, but he said, well, I see, my vision tells me this should be the language of Pan-Africanism. Yeah.
Indeed. Dr. Tendo, now as we're about to conclude the program, where do you see Kiswahili maybe for the next 50 years? Do you think Kiswahili will become one of the leading international language?
Thank you, Carol. First of all, you give it a longer period, 50 years.
10?
Let's talk 10 years. Strategically, you know, when you're planning, plan 10, 15, or 10, 20, 30. But for starters, I want to make a call to the leadership on the African continent. The fear of the unknown, as the Prof alluded to, and also complacency. You know, when you go to AU, you'll see a lot of confusion from our leaders. Whoever stands to speak, this one is speaking French, another in Arabic, the other in Portuguese, the other one. Now, and this is a gathering of a family called Africa. Kama mmeshindwa kuwa na lugha moja ya kuunganisha as a continent. When somebody from Angola gets on the podium to speak, others are busy running to pick gadgets for translation. Can we be intentional? Can we be intentional? And the intentionality begins with the budget. You know, tunapozungumzia kueneza Kiswahili, there is a cost implication. So governments must be deliberate to set aside budgets towards promotion of Swahili language. Because it's like preaching the gospel. These colonial masters were very smart. They knew that we have a gospel, a message to be sent to Africa and across the world. They budgeted for their people, the missionaries. Hawakuamka tu asubuhi without a budget or a plan, and they came to Africa. Right now, if there is any successful project, it's Christianity. Because the planners sat, whatever they sat, they agreed that we needed to train missionaries, and we need now to deploy them in different parts of the world with a budget, with a strategy, and a mission. So whereas we sit here to talk about the promotion of Swahili, first of all, within Africa, the concern isn't even outside Africa for starters, because we are looking at cross-border trade, we are looking at our own strategic security within Africa, we are looking at our preserving our own cultures. So as the Prof put it, when we go to Namibia to teach them Swahili, we are not letting them drop the indigenous languages, but we are saying your local languages must be preserved, but there is a slightly more important, if I may put it, language which unifies us, and that is Swahili. So to me, at a commission level, to answer you, Swahili is strategically and steadily progressing. Now that we have presidents who have chosen to begin addressing conferences in Swahili, I look forward to a day when Mama Samia or President Museveni or President Ruto will address the General Assembly, the UN General Assembly in Swahili.
In Swahili, yes.
Kazi kwao to look for those gadgets, because once they decide to learn this language, first of all, how proud are we? We can only feel proud when we speak our own language. And as African Union Swahili Commission, the mandate we have is to ensure that we promote this language within Africa and beyond. Whereas we have a Kiswahili Commission for the East African community, Kakama, okay, the East African Community Swahili Commission. Ours is called the Akalan AU Swahili Commission, mandated to promote Swahili within Africa and globally. And I trust with at policy level, budget, the willingness, and the fear of the unknown should be dealt away with. Then the rest, steadily, we will get there. Yes.
Indeed, steadily we'll get there. Professor, where do you see Kiswahili in 10 years?
In 10 years? Actually, the question should be yesterday. Well, I see Swahili becoming indeed an African language, a Pan-African language, not in 10 years, because now the move is there. We have a University of Pan-Africanism in Senegal. They're advocating for that. We have University of Dar es Salaam as a memorandum of understanding with several universities in Africa. And one of the movement is the promotion of Swahili out there, having the teachers coming from those universities to Tanzania to study Swahili and back there. University of Dar es Salaam actually has a special package for, if I may use the word, advertising and promoting Swahili. Any African candidate who comes to study master's or a PhD will have to pay the same fee as a Tanzanian when he or she is studying Swahili. And that's kind of a promotion. So that when they're coming from Egypt or from Morocco or from Algeria, wherever, they're coming to study in Tanzania. They're coming to study Swahili in Tanzania. They will be, paying, the fee will be the same as Tanzania. That promotion is very important. You elevate Swahili out there by making people come and study Swahili. So in so doing, I don't see, even if you said 50 years or 20, I see it coming. No, ideally, seriously, I see it coming. Swahili teachers will be out there in different countries teaching Swahili from their own angles. And for that way, we will join hands and make Swahili an ideal language for Africa.
Yes. To do with the performing arts as a strategy. Right here in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, Musanii, Diamond Platnumz, and other artists, their music is heard all over Africa. Whereas they enjoy the lyrics and the rhythm and the beats of the songs, some go ahead to now ask, when Diamond Platnumz is singing about a song, what message is in there? So we need to be intentional at strategic level that when an artist has composed a song in Swahili, how deliberate can we push this song across Africa? And can we have subtitles when we have videos?
Yes.
Because as you listen to the song, you have subtitles, which subtitles will enable somebody who in Arabic, subtitles in French, over that very video song. Then also, look at if people who don't understand the value and the importance of Swahili. When you look at international media platforms, they all have Swahili bulletins. Recently, I was in Parliament in Uganda, and I was telling them, if I go to our regional parliament, I want to present a bill on the floor of Parliament. No media house within East Africa and Africa should have a license renewed when they don't have Swahili programs. At the policy level, we must be deliberate. Why? Because when you see VOA, when you look at Deutsche Welle, when you look at BBC, they all have a Swahili bulletin. Then you come to Uganda, you go to Rwanda, you don't have a bulletin in Swahili. In Africa, that is a mistake.
That should be changed.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Professor Mutembe, Professor Alden Mutembe from the University of Dar es Salaam. Thank you so much, Dr. Kisembo Ronextendo, the Group CEO of Africa Mashariki Fest, for your time and for the contribution that you have provided and for being part of Focus on this week. I'm being told we are completely out of time. So from today's discussion, TVC One viewers, it actually reminded us that Kiswahili is far more than a means of communication. It is a language of identity, unity, diplomacy, and opportunities, and more emphasis has been put that Africa is already seen as the Kiswahili language is already seen as a pan-African language, in that government should put emphasis on budget, be willing to invest and actually embrace the Kiswahili language, but also avoid the fear of the unknown. Leading the program today, I was your host, Caroline Maleo. Until next time, bye-bye.